I told him what I had here, but I'm not saying it's right.
Oh, you couldn't find it on
It gave me Aztec, so chiastic, Chaiastastic. That's what I had.
To the footnote, and
Is it in the NIV? How's it spelled? Well, that's different than what I had, but I don't
You
see
have
it.
a couple extra letters.
under 610, on the second line.
That's it. Oh, yeah, Chiastic.
CIC. So I did it from your pronunciation.
All right, well, better than me. All right, everybody, let's get going. I wanted to go over the illustration that we have for the Syro-Ephraimitic Wars. Okay, everybody say it, Syro-Ephraimitic Wars. Okay, Syro-Ephraimitic Wars. Okay, good. Anyways, what we are looking at here is the king of Assyria, who is wanting to be deposed and taken off of the ability to dictate and rule the northern kingdoms, goes to Judah, and didn't work out. So we realize that Judah didn't join forces under Ahaz. Son of Tabiel, he's the one that they wanted to put on the throne instead. So, all right, we will leave it there. I know there's more that are on that illustration, but that's stuff I'm not going to deal with, so we're going to leave it. Now, we are in chapter 7, basically with the Emmanuel thing. And in chapter 8, just to summarize what we have in chapter 8, is that Assyria is now chosen to be the Lord's instrument. And you cannot stand against Assyria. Isaiah knew and had to tell Ahaz the same thing. You cannot stand against Assyria because Assyria is God's instrument. All right, as strange as that sounds, Assyria is God's instrument. So you cannot stand against them. The issue then talks about the chapter 9, when we understand Assyria and we can't stand against it. I want you to look at the last verse of chapter 8. It's verse 22. Talking about the whole aspect of Assyria as the Lord's instrument. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. A very hopeless situation about what's going to happen because of Assyria. What's the next verse? Chapter. Nevertheless, even though that's going to happen, nevertheless. Now this nevertheless really points forward. This points forward to Jesus. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Zebulun and Naphtali were the lands that were in northern Israel. So when the Assyrians would come down, the first to feel their brunt and get it the worst would be Zebulun and Naphtali. So he who in the past humbled the lands of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. How is he going to honor the Galilee area? Jesus is going to be from Galilee. Jesus is going to conduct his ministry in Galilee. Jesus didn't minister in Jerusalem. At most, he was there 3 times. Well, if you count his birth. But in his adult life, some argue he wasn't there until he was crucified. But we do have references where Jesus goes to Jerusalem for this feast or that feast, so I don't necessarily buy into that. But anyways, he was He was doing his ministry up north. And it says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors, every warrior's boot used in battle. This is the reading for Christmas Day. And every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning and will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulder, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, and he will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forevermore. The zeal of the Almighty will accomplish this.
That's what I counted, number 1, and I found 6 of them.
What do you mean? I counted number 1 and found 6.
I counted that the first one that's predicting Christ in Isaiah. Is there?
Well, I don't know what other prophecy there was, other than, behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son. That's quoted by Matthew.
Yeah, but there's other, excuse me, I shouldn't be talking.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to spend a lot of time looking at that, but for our intent and purpose about what we want to accomplish here today, I want you to realize that as the whole threat of Assyria is that they're going to utterly waste the nation. Nevertheless, okay, chapter 9, verse 1, nevertheless, we get this messianic prophecy here. And so the next section deals with Israel's second crisis, which was the fall of Samaria, starting in 9 verse 8 through 10 verse 4. And we have that described in there. When we get to chapter 10, we again hear about the infliction of the Assyrians upon the people. And, well, that's in verse 5. But in verse 1 to 5, it talks about the what the Assyrians are going to do. They're going to totally destroy the land. And then comes a section that after the Assyrians are going to destroy the land, we get a big but, starting at verse 5. Woe to the Assyrians, the rod of my anger. So after